Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, where we uncover the pivotal stories that shaped extraordinary leaders. I'm Dusty Holcomb, and on this show, we don't just talk about leadership, we decode it. In every episode, we sit down with change makers who've walked through fire, challenged the status quo, and emerged with wisdom worth sharing. These aren't just lessons, they're lived experiences, real moments that reveal the mindset, resilience, and clarity behind lasting impact. Today, you're going to hear one of those stories. What happens when bold leadership meets cultural transformation? Today's guest isn't just making waves, she's shifting systems. Claudia Caballero, CEO of Centro Hispano, is the powerhouse reimagining what inclusive leadership really looks like. From Honduras to Tennessee, her journey is proof that purpose-driven leadership can build bridges, empower communities, and disrupt the status quo in the best way possible. If you've ever wondered how to lead with impact, identity, and intentionality, don't miss this. Let's get into it. This is Leadership Unlocked. Claudia, thank you. I appreciate you being here, and man, I cannot wait to learn from you today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
What is one leadership or principle, leadership belief or principle that you live by, and what's the story behind it?
The leadership principle I live by is to trust my instinct. When I have the inkling of something I should do, and all of even my coaches, my mentors, my other, people I go to for wisdom are like, oh, I don't know, that might not be the best thing to do. I usually, once I get that gut feeling, I follow it, and it serves me well.
Okay, trust your gut. That's like leadership lesson 101, straight from you. Trust your gut. Do you have a system or a process by which you learn to listen to this, or do you go like on a long journey through the woods with a journal? How do you get quiet to understand when this voice in the back of your head saying, hey, silly, listen to what I've got going on?
It's been a journey to trust myself. And so I think that, 10 years ago, I would have asked for 50 people's opinion before I made a decision. And not that that's wrong. There's big decisions in my life that I do take input from a lot of people. Nowadays, I look for fewer people and I ask not what they think I should do, but what they think maybe I'm not thinking of while I'm in this process. And what dimension might I be missing? So I add that to what I already have in my research. I think oftentimes there's this concept that people that lead with their intuition are just like, it's like this woo-woo hippie thing, right? And the people that lead with data are like data-driven. And I used to think that, and I used to feel like I'd be hard on myself because of it. I was like, oh, I'm not doing this the way it should be. And over the years, I've realized that there's a whole bunch of data in the decisions that I make. It just doesn't look the same way as other people make decisions.
Okay, I love this because like what you're talking about, like there's so many nuggets that you just touched on. One is I don't look for people to tell me what to do anymore. I look for people to help me think better or expose to me what I might be missing, which is searching for additional data points. Like you're just getting data and assimilating it and packaging it. I don't think it's some woo-woo hippie thing. I think it's, it's a really cool way of going, help me understand what I'm missing. Don't just tell me what to do. Like I love that. And that comes with experience. It comes with growth. It comes with wisdom. Like it's actually the application of wisdom. Do you have any experiences where you've like practiced this and maybe made a decision that hindsight was not the right one, but you learned from it, or where your gut was like, man, I'm so glad I trusted my gut? Is there, and you can change names to protect the innocent. Are there any stories that would bring this to life for our listeners?
Yes, but I want to go back to one thing you said before, because I think the woo-woo thing that you were talking about, it's not even so much that other people might consider it woo-woo. I think being a woman, being a young woman, being an immigrant, being a Latina, like there were all these layers, right, to how I approached decision making. And when I learned what leadership looked like, most leadership that I learned from, that I read about, that I watched, wasn't people that looked like me. And so oftentimes, I think that's been my journey into identifying my leadership style. It's not that other people were considering me woo-woo hippie. It was I was thinking that I wasn't being an appropriate leader because of the way I was approaching my work. I just wanted to add that as a...
I love this. We're going to go all over the place because you're a complete badass. You've got an MBA from Vanderbilt. You took an organization from basically nothing and have made an impact in lives. And we're going to go there. I want to hear your story. But I love that you talk about your journey as a leader isn't just trying to be like all the other leaders. It's assimilating these different lessons, observations, things into who you are, and not trying to fit into this mold of what everybody else would expect a leader to be, and doing it authentically. Like that's incredibly powerful. And I think it's a huge component of the success you've had, because I don't, and all the time I've known you, I've never seen you show up and try to be someone who isn't you, which is one of the things that
for me, quite frankly.
It doesn't work for anybody if they're really being honest. So you definitely show up authentically and just, man, in a complete badass kind of way. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up as a badass?
I come from a line of really strong women, and my parents always encouraged us to find what made us happy all of our lives. And so I think that was the first milestone, right? I know people that their parents are like, you need to get a job, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I remember once younger, I was living in Austin. Oh my God, I was serving pizza at this place and I had to do a night shift because it was required. Everyone had to do the night shift. And I got home at 5:30 in the morning. And I remember calling my dad after I fell asleep and got some rest. And I called my dad and I was just weeping. I was like, Papa, I can't do this. Like, this is horrible. This was like, it was just, and he just on the phone, he's like, Claudia, leave. Like, why are you doing this? You don't need to do this. And so every job I've ever taken on, my family owns a business in Honduras. So I've been an entrepreneur since I was 15. And it wasn't just like, oh, how cute, you work in your family business sometimes. It was like, no, designing menus, purchasing, making pricing structures, like creating. Actually, in my undergrad, I had an ops class and they were creating processes, and I took my kitchen because we were remodeling our restaurant. And my project was remodeling the kitchen to optimize the work we did there. And so I always had this practical component to the work that I was doing. So my parents telling us to pursue happiness, very practical experience alongside my education. And I think I've never considered failure an option. And I'm reflecting on this now at this phase of my career where I'm turning 40 this year. I'm thinking about what's next in my life. What other lives am I to live? And I realized sitting here at the organization I'm at today, and there's never been a day I don't want to go to work. I love my team. I love the work that I do. There are days I don't want to work, but those are two different things, right? It never crossed my mind that it could not work. I'll try things that don't work, and then I'll learn something, and then I'll try again, right? But failure was never an option. And so I think that in the back of my mind just kept me going forward. And I think I'm reflecting on it more these days, and I'm like, I don't know if that's normal. I don't know if that is a thing that everyone does. I think a lot of immigrants, it's a very immigrant value, right? You can't give up. There's no other option. There's no plan B. And I did have plan Bs. I could have done anything else with my career and with my life, but that wasn't how I approached it. And so I think the journey to becoming an unapologetic version of myself has been a lifelong journey. I want to say something about this because I've told you this before, but I really believe this very deeply. I say to people, from 0 to 20, life happens to you. You don't really get a choice, right? Like trauma or joys or whatever it is, you don't get to choose. However, from 20 to 40, I don't know about the rest of the world, but I have been relentless on my healing, on my identity, on honing in on the skills that I'm going to need for the rest of my life. And so at the cusp of turning 40, I joke with people because I'm like, these are my years. From 40 to 100, like I'm gonna be awesome because I've got these tools, and I probably will live to 100 because I'm going to Honduras in November. It's my grandmother's 99th birthday. So
Oh, man.
So yeah, I think that it's been a journey of learning to love myself. That's the biggest, being forgiving with myself, learning to love myself, and learning that the people around me want me to succeed. So I have to ask for the help that I need. And I think I've gotten really good at asking for help and having people show up for me.
Okay, there's so much richness there. There's something you said that I need to like take massive amounts of notes, because you said some really cool things. One is you never going to fail, right? Failure is not an option. You're never going to fail. And yet it would have been easy for you to view this phone call at 5:30 a.m. to your papa going, I can't do this, as a failure moment. Instead, he's affirming and not saying, well, you have to just grind it out. You have to stick with this. He's going, no, quit, do something else. It was not letting a label or a role be your definition of success, but understanding who you were and having that alignment with purpose, and not settling for the external, the environmental, all those things like it. That stands out so clear to me, because when you talk about failure is not an option, so many people would say in a role, if I'm not successful in that role, that is failure. But that's not what you said. You said, no, my sense of success comes from inside out, not from outside in. Am I understanding or interpreting that right?
So I'll tell you the end of that story, because it was a ridiculous outcome. So what happened was my dad was like, quit that, you don't need it. And I didn't want to necessarily do that because I needed the job at the time. So I went back. I was still in training. I was on my 3rd day of training at this restaurant. And I went back to the general manager and I said, look, I'm not going to do night shifts. But if you need someone to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed every morning that you need me on a shift, I'll do it. And I'll go find another job part-time. And I did. And so he was like, all right, especially because in this job, a lot of musicians. So the young people would show up just hungover, exhausted, just like, and they needed somebody to come in who was ready for it, right? And so instead of being like, well, I've got to quit this job because it doesn't fit and I got to go, I said to myself, let me ask if they're willing to work with me. And so I went back. They gave me the job. I worked there for over a year. I had a wonderful time. And I came in the morning shift and I was out by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I could go to bed at 10, which is what I ideally wanted. Actually, that's not true. I'd go out dancing in the evenings. But the point being, I think also in life for me, a no is, I'm a rule bender. I'm not a rule breaker necessarily. Some people would argue that, but I think that rules are put in place, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean we can't question the rules. It doesn't mean we can't approach people and ask, and oftentimes we see rules as these written in stone, no discussion, no negotiation. And so I also think that that's been something that I've worked with in my life, just realizing that when something is a no or not a good fit, let's tweak it. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Maybe it still works for us, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm also okay letting things go. I'm getting better at letting things go. I think in my life, I've been someone who oftentimes holds on too long once it's time to let the flow of life make other decisions. But I'm getting better at it.
Oh, it's a journey every day. Okay, so you aren't going to let someone else define you. You've got your purpose. You said something else I wanted to touch on, which is requesting or getting insight, perspective from others to help make your decisions. You've been really good at asking for help. And many people view that as a sign of weakness or a sign. Like I know I personally gone through that journey. It was, yeah, I can't ask for help because that would be exposing some flaw. Now I'm at the other, completely other end of that. It's like, I know nothing. I'm just going to ask a lot of people some, for all the insights I can get. Have you always been comfortable asking for help?
I think I wouldn't be here today if I wouldn't have asked for help along the way. Just from, growing up in Honduras, one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given is people seeing what I'm capable of before I know that opportunity even exists. It's not always asking for help. Someone might give us unsolicited advice, right? But I had to trust myself to believe that I could do what they thought I could do.
Oh, that's rich. So to play that back, safe to say that you were not, quote unquote, ready for every role or every opportunity when it came to you. You had to grow into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, there are so many stories of me not knowing what the heck was going on. And I was like, I'll figure it out. The most recent was this role, right? Or this one is 10 years ago, or grad school 3 or 4 years ago. I had no idea how to go to university in the States, right? My undergrad's from Honduras. I needed a village to go to grad school, a village, and unapologetic about it. I had a friend during the pandemic that sat with me once a week to go over my essays. I had to write 5 essays. I needed a full ride to this program. She sat with me for 9 months, once a week, to go over my essays. We never had even met in person. We had never even met in person at this point. Now we're dear friends. But she was someone she's a young Latina as well, an immigrant. Someone did it for her, and she's a professor at UT. And she said, someone did this for me when I came to the United States as an undergrad at 17. This is not a problem. I'm so happy to pay it forward. And I didn't know how to write essays at the time. I had I don't write like an American. I write like a Honduran, and it's very different. So absolutely no clue. A million things in life I've had no clue. But I do believe in myself to be able to figure things out.
Okay, so let's pick Centro. I love the Vanderbilt. I want to go there as well. And wow, to have someone not just invest, hey, I'll read your essay and I'll give you feedback. Not, I'll read the first chapter of your book and I'll tell you what I think. But I will be alongside you in the journey with no expectation or desire for anything to come back to them. But they're doing this because it's aligned with their purpose. It's aligned with their values. Someone did it for them. It's making an impact. Like, holy smokes, wow.
And I will tell you that she's amazing and she's a dear friend. And that year I got the full scholarship. And the second runner-up was that we had studied together for the entry exam. We had studied together for the GMAT. It was very hard. So this young woman out of Nashville and I studied together, and I got the first scholarship. They offered her a 50% scholarship, and she said, I can't do it. She was also a nonprofiter. So the next year, I went over all of her essays with her, and she got the full scholarship to Vanderbilt the year after I did. And so for me, it was such a gift because I had learned, like, in blood, sweat, and tears how to write these essays. And then my dear friend in Nashville, because by this point, we had been like weeping over statistics and all these other things. So by then I had helped her. And so it was a beautiful story of continuing to pay forward. But anyway, you wanted to go back to the Centro story.
I don't know. I want to double click on all these stories. These are amazing. I want to meet her. I think so much in life we get so self-centered. Like, I think society programs us this way, life programs us this way. It's what are we going to get from doing this thing? And not only were you the benefit and recipient of someone else's gift, you gave it. Man, that is leadership. When we're here to serve and we're here to give, and it's not about us. Like, I think that's just principle. I don't know if it's principle number 1 or not, but I think it might be principle number 1 to serve others.
It felt so good because I think the young woman I helped get into school, she was a first-generation college student. She was very low income herself. And like the idea of young women supporting women, there's this concept out there in the world that I've never experienced that like women catclaw each other. I have never had that experience. I have always been welcomed, and I've been the recipient of generosity of so many women in my life. And I also want to be that for other people. There's a little bit of a challenge because sometimes we don't necessarily like some of the people that are looking for help, or sometimes we don't agree with their values. And so when I think about that, my approach is, I may not like all of this person, but this one thing they're trying to do, I want to help with this. And I do really believe that the world is not about what you give me and I give you, especially in the place we are in our lives, right? I don't need whatever you get. I don't need the thing that I gave you back. I need you to give it to somebody else who needs it. And so somewhere down the line, 500 gifts from there, somebody will be back at my door giving me something completely different. And nobody owes anyone anything. In the work I do at Centro, we're a wraparound service organization. We support the immigrant community, but also Latinos who are not immigrants, first, second, third generation. My job is not only, I fundraise and I create strategy and stuff, but part of what I love is the process of supporting my team, my staff, who many of them are have very similar stories to the clients we serve, but I love being able to provide for them opportunities or see things that they don't see for themselves yet. And so I feel like over and over again, we're opening doors, and you either trust yourself or you don't. I know people who won't trust themselves. I'm not ready yet. I don't know, I can't do it. And sometimes it's not the right time in our lives. And that's also something to really be mindful of. I know that the first year I applied to grad school, my instinct was telling me it wasn't the right time. And the very next year, I knew before I even started the scholarship was mine. I just knew it. I was applying, I did the best work, but I knew it was mine. And so there's that flow as well. Again, back to intuition, right? Like, trust yourself.
Okay, let's talk about Centro. And I have a little bit of insight, but I don't have all the insight. 10 years ago, you go to Centro. How many people were there? What was the organization's purpose and mission? And then we're going to talk about where it is now, but there's some places along this journey that are going to be rich with gold for us to unpack.
Let's take a step back. I was in Austin. I wanted my partner at the time to maintain me for a while because I wanted a break. And he's like, I'm going to be earning $50,000 as a postdoc. Like, I can't. So I was like, fine. And he's like, well, what are you interested in? And I was like, Latino nonprofit, something like that. And there was a job position open. He found it on some website or some online thing. And it was for an executive director of Centro Hispano. I applied for the job in February, March. I get offered the job in May, but I don't move until July. So they waited for me. Anyway, so first of all, I didn't even want really a job. And then I drive across the country with all of our stuff. We get to Knoxville on July 3rd. We rest on July 4th. And I show up on a Tuesday to my job, July 5th. And there was this young woman who was the board chair at the time. And she's like, here's the keys, here's a phone, here's a computer. Is there anything else you need? This was my onboarding process as the executive director of an organization in a new community where I did not know a soul. And I will never forget this, Dusty. I look at her and I'm like, don't worry, I'll figure it out. And so she left. And I was there by myself in this building.
Oh my goodness.
So that's where it started, like, I'll figure it out. But I was one full-time employee and I had one part-time employee. And I had a sort of kind of $60,000 budget and some money in the bank somewhere. Not sure how you could spend it. Not sure what the requirements were. That's where it started.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So contrast it. Tell us where you are now, just to paint the picture from going on the from to.
We are currently at a team about 20 full-time, 20 part-time, and we have a budget of about $2.5 million for 2025. And we are in a new building, which is absolutely amazing. It's 3 times the size of our former building. And I have an amazing exec team, and I have incredible, incredible team members. It has, again, been blood, sweat, and tears. Definitely blood and sweat and tears. All of it. From like stubbing your toe, your finger with a hammer, trying to put a picture up, sweaty days where there was no AC. And I remember I cried for the first 3 to 6 months at that job every day after leaving. I have no idea, Dusty, why I didn't think of just quitting. Like, what was wrong with me? Why didn't I just say, you know what? This is too hard. I don't want to do this. I think I would do that now as a more grown up person. I was 30 when I took that job, 31 maybe, never been an executive director. And I told them that. I was like, look, I may not have all the experience you need, but I will be the person that works the hardest to make this succeed. And they trusted me.
Seems like a pretty good bet on their part. What's your favorite transformation story of a life or of people that you've impacted over this journey over the last 10 years? What is a story of impact that because you took this job, because you stuck with it, because you figured it out, what's your favorite impact story?
I don't have one, but I will tell you, one of my dear friends manages our youth and family programs, and she told me, I think it must have been 2019, she said, I have 3 kids, you need to be their mentor. I'm like, I didn't have time. Actually, it's been longer than that because we're probably 8 years into mentorship now. Anyway, they were high schoolers, and I was like, just make sure they're all 18 because I don't want to be like worrying about minors and the rules and this and that. And she's like, all right, here they are. So they were all finishing high school. And I had a Guatemalan American born in the States, doesn't speak Spanish, speaks Acateco and Canjoval, and he speaks English, but he also understands a lot of Spanish. Then I had a completely undocumented queer young woman who was an artist, but she'd been laying floors, installing floors since she was 14 with her dad. And I had this crazy DACA kid who was too cool for school and wild kid. He wanted the big experience. He wanted to go to UT and he wanted to be in a fraternity and he wanted all these things that but he didn't want to spend his parents' money, who had also set aside money for him to go. But he was like, I'm not going to do that. So these kids, I have been following them for 8 years, and they didn't always do what I wanted them to do or what I thought was best for them. But the young Guatemalan American is the first Acateco real estate agent in the community. We have a large Guatemalan community that speaks indigenous languages. He's the first, and he's a huge advocate in the community. The young woman, college was not a good fit. We got her a full ride, but it just, because she doesn't have paper, she couldn't use her degree afterwards. So she went through a small business program through my organization, and now she owns her own company with her dad, and they're doing great. And the young man who is DACA, he was on the verge of quitting school so many times. He finished college. He has his degree. He's doing all sorts of wonderful things. I think they are 3 of many, right? I mean, we've had thousands of young people we've helped, but I think because I don't have children, following them in their journey and just sitting down with them with an existential crisis, like, the young woman was like, one time she was dating a guy and he was super religious and he wasn't welcome to her queerness. And then she was dating a girl and this and that. And just like sitting through these questions of life with them, it's just been such a joy and such a gift. And it's also been a learning process because what do you mean you're not going to do what I say? I know best, right? It's just like, it's like being an aunt. It's like being a parent. Like, they're not going to take your path, and me accepting that that's going to be their path, but that I'm going to be here for them throughout their lives, in their journeys. And, before I used to meet with them once a month when they were in high school and when they were in college. And now I see them maybe 3 or 4 times a year. But, we more sit down like friends. They're in their early 20s. They're figuring out different processes in life. I'm happy to be part of their lives.
Wow. And you said it. That's just 3 representative examples of thousands that your organization has had an impact on. And I'm laughing in my head about something you just said, which is that they don't always do what you want, right? They don't always do what you say. But it links back to me to what you were saying at the beginning around, you're not looking for someone to tell you what to do. You're looking for information that will help you make a better decision. they're not looking for somebody to tell them what to do. They're looking for to find their own way. And so
That is a great point because I've never seen it from that perspective, Dusty.
it's funny. We often have to take our own medicine. At least that's been my experience.
Yes, all the time. And sometimes it is so hard. So I'm currently coaching a young man at Vanderbilt, and he's one of my best friend's sons, and she's my coworker. And so he has ADHD. I have ADHD. First of all, I'm like, dude, you've got to pay some attention because I'm coaching you for free. And my time is valuable. But I tell him things, and then I'm like, oh, crap. Like, I need to do that myself. One really clear example was like, look, you've got to set aside time for when the homework is due, but you've got to set aside time on your calendar, spaces where you're actually doing the work. And after I hung up, I was like, uh-oh, I'm not doing that. I want to point out that one of the things I find very, very important in my leadership work personally is not only does my organization serve a community, right? I am also very, very committed to the team members in my organization getting the same supports. And so for me, it is equally as important for folks who started out. I have someone who started out as I have a whole bunch of employees that started out as volunteers, and then a position came up open, and I have seen people grow in their, I don't separate personal and professional growth and leadership. I think it all buckets, it all becomes one big bucket. But it has been so inspirational to see people in my organization who have been there, 5-10 years, and see them grow into new levels of leadership that they didn't even know. And so one of the things I hear often from especially my exec team is, I never thought I could do this. But the organization has provided the space, and you have provided the backing for me to feel like if I fail, I can still learn and I can still grow. So I'm also, additional to all the community work we do, I am very proud of the work we do internally. I think a lot of times as nonprofits, we're like, oh, there's just no time, there's just no resources, we can't do this. And then we don't end up supporting the community that works with us. And I think that that's a missed opportunity. And I have plenty of people who have left my organization and now work in other places. And to me, that's just an asset. That's just some, more skills out in the community to partner with my organization.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's so important to look at this through the lens of when we invest into our people, our team, and and I tend to agree with you. It's not professional growth or personal growth. It's growth. It's not a line there. It's growth. But when we're making those investments, they're impacting the audience they serve. They're impacting the people they're going to. It's that ripple effect that you were talking about, earlier. It's like it may not come back to you. You don't need that thing back to you. It'll come back on some way 500 flavors from now in a different way. I think it's so important. And I love the way you just said it with somebody has left the organization, but they've carried the lesson with them. They've taken this impact and they're impacting someone else. One of my first mentors, I was terrified to resign because I got this great opportunity. And I went and gave him the letter, and he was so gracious. He said, one of the best things I ever learned in serving in the military is I only had junior officers and officers to care for 2 to 3 years. I knew they were going to rotate. I knew they were going on to the next thing. And it wasn't about making them as good as they could be for that role. It was about making sure they were prepared for their next role and their growth. And that's what you're doing. I love that. I think that's so incredibly powerful and so often overlooked from a leadership perspective, because if we're not growing, we're not impacting, we're not increasing our impact where we are today, and we're not elevating our impact for the future. So kudos to you. I love that approach.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's changing in leadership and leadership investment is, the younger generations don't stay at a company as long as they did before, right? In other generations. And so it's easy to say, I'm going to invest in someone I know is going to be here for 30 years. And I think we as leaders across all sectors need to start thinking about what it looks like to invest in leaders and growth in our organization for as long as people will be with us. Because I think it's also like a human philosophy for me. Like, I want you to grow as a person, regardless of where you are, right? So at the end of the day as well, it's also the relationship we have with money, right? It's not my money. Money isn't ours. We have the opportunity. It's in our hands for an amount of time, and we get to choose what we do with it. And so
Amen.
I just really believe that when I do have those opportunities, I make sure I can make them happen. And sometimes we don't. These years coming up are going to be really rough in finances. But I know that there are opportunities to grow people's social capital in the community. There are ways to give people growth opportunities that aren't monetary. So giving people visibility, stepping aside to not be the only one that people see. These are all ways that as a nonprofit, we think of creatively so that our teams can also shine and also build their reputation as professionals in the community.
I love that. I'm reminded of Sir Richard Branson's quote when someone asked him, what if you train these people and they leave? And he said, what if I don't train them and they stay?
I love
and
it.
It's
How
one of my
horrible
all-time
is
favorites.
that?
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, like invest. And like what you just said, it's not just about the financial capital, it's the social capital, it's the opportunities, it's the chances to explore or stretch. That's so incredibly powerful and impactful, well beyond this tactical thing we're doing. It's about the relationship, and it's about the impact that that relationship can have. Let me ask you something. Are you leading off of instinct? I mean, you've got the vision, you've built the thing, but most leaders I talk to are still flying without a system. Vision to Victory, the mastermind, changes that. It's a 12-week experience where we install the leadership operating system you've always needed: purpose, strategy, cadence, metrics, execution. This isn't a course. It's not more content. It's a small group of leaders who are done chasing clarity and ready to lead with it. You'll walk out with a full leadership operating system, a trusted circle of peers, and a repeatable way to scale without losing yourself along the way. There are only 12 seats in this group, and most are already spoken for. It's an application-only process. Go to arcusgroup.com/mastermind to apply. So I've been sitting on this. You said it a minute ago, and when you were talking about the person that you're mentoring and their calendar, I'm guilty of also the same thing. And I'm reminded that we're all so often, we have to teach what we most often need to learn. One of my mentors told me that, and it was like, yeah, I teach a lot, same things that I actually have to learn myself and work on. If you were going back in time and you could tap young Claudia on the shoulder on July 5th, 9 years ago, 2016, and say, here are 3 things I want you to know and remember and hold on to, what 3 things would you have told yourself?
I don't have them like perfectly thought out for you, but I know one of them would have been around being diagnosed earlier for ADHD. I was diagnosed at 34. It's very common for women to get diagnosed later in life. And then I sat on it for 2 or 3 years being like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, it's not affecting me. And then I went to grad school and everything fell apart. And I think understanding my ADHD would have helped me be more compassionate to myself. I could tap myself on the shoulder, but long story short, that you can tap yourself on the shoulder as much as you want, Dusty, but like, you learn things in life when you're supposed to learn them. So like, I'm going to take your question with a grain of salt here, mister, because the other, I don't wish I would have learned earlier because I wasn't meant to learn it earlier. But the other thing that would have been helpful to know earlier was my wound with money, my relationship to money, where it came from and how it was holding me back from some of the fundraising I could have been doing. And I just found that one out 3 months ago. So like, I wasn't ready for the lesson, right? Like, I was not ready for that lesson 9 years ago. I think the combination of both of those, sometimes I have a fractional fundraising team that I work with, and they're coaches and they're mentors, but they also do some of the work. They're wonderful. There's one of them, I literally text him on a random Tuesday and I'm like, hey, I got to meet with this person to ask them for $50,000 and I'm procrastinating. I can't send the email right now. And then he and I chat about it, and then I get over it, and then I send the email to set up the meeting. Like, that's one of the things. The other thing I wish, and I couldn't have afforded it then, Dusty, but again, Your question is flawed, sir.
Well, my question is meant to give other people insights that they can go, oh, that's a really good idea. I should do that.
The other thing I would have told myself was it's okay to have an adult babysitter. And I phrased it this way, and it's not what it is. But when I got the nugget of information, that's what it came phrased as. And what it turned into was working with you as a coach. And I think that, again, I wasn't ready for it 9 years ago. However, those three things, ADHD, my wound to money, and feeling like it was okay to have someone to hold me accountable, but more than the accountability component of it, it was somebody who I felt had my back. And I spent a lot of years feeling like I was the only person with this organization. I was responsible for this organization's flight or death, right? And I think that was very hard and very lonely sometimes. And then I have a fourth thing, but that's not necessarily a lesson because I've done it my whole life. I am relentless about personal and professional growth. So if there is an opportunity out there, if someone's like, there's this fellowship, or someone was like, hey, there's this person who's becoming a certified coach and they need to do some in-kind coaching, would you be interested? Like, always raising my hand, because I don't believe we can be excellent leaders unless we're being questioned, unless we're being prompted, unless we're being guided into difficult places inside ourselves to understand ourselves better.
Amen. I could not agree with you more. All leadership is preceded by the ability to lead yourself, to learn, to dig in, to understand that, frankly, to discount your own bullshit and get past yourself so you can learn from it. And the question might be flawed, but the intent is to give other people nuggets.
As you call me on my own. It's a great question. Great question, Dusty.
You can say it. It's bullshit. But I'm okay with that. All right. So I'm gonna switch to some rapid fire questions. I'm not going to give you time to think. I did give you a few of these in advance, but most of them I didn't. So fair warning. Given what you just said about learning, and everybody has a different learning style, what's a book that you believe every leader should read?
Was that one of the questions on here?
It might have been. It may not.
Yes, good. Okay. I've got two. Thank goodness. Because I read so many books, but none of them are business books. And so I feel guilty that I don't read like leadership books because like as a leader, that's what I'm supposed to be cool, right? Like, so anyway.
Well, hold on a minute. Now, I didn't say it had to be a leadership book. I just said a book.
You didn't say that. This is my own issue. Me personally, Claudia believes that to be a great leader, I should be reading leadership books.
Fair enough.
Two books that most recently, I would say, just changed. Like, I don't know if you know this, but to me, when I have a really big soul lesson, I feel like a clunk in my soul or in my heart. It's like when you're in the movies where they're doing one of those codes on a lock and you hear it click in and you're like, that's it. That's how I feel it in my heart or in my soul. And I read the book called The Road Back to You, The Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery by Ian Morgan Crone and Suzanne Stable. Maybe that's how you pronounce her name. And the reason that book was so, wait a minute, is this fast fire or do you want me to tell me why that book was so important?
Unpack it, please. And we'll put links for the books in the show notes. No, this is a conversation, not a fast fire. Go for it.
Okay. So it's very brief though, but I realized in that book that I had I had a tie, which apparently coaches that do Enneagram say you can't have a tie, but I had a tie as an 8 and as a 2. And you start the book reading about the 8 and I was like, oh my God, I'm amazing. Oh my God, everyone loves me. I'm a wonderful leader. And then you had to read through the whole book. And then I got to 2 and I was like, holy shit. I felt like someone had like slapped me across the face because all the 2 is the helper. And I was in a place of very unhealthy helper. And after reading that book, I went back and I redefined relationships across every area of my life, my family, my friendships, my professional relationships, really realizing why I was in those relationships. And I broke up with people. I broke up with friends. I broke up with family for some time. I broke up with people I thought would be good for me as thought leaders or partners in the professional work. That book changed my life. Changed my life. I've done a lot of research. I don't have a book for you because I've just read a lot of different books, but I read a book about healthy, anxious, and avoidant attachment styles. Oh my God. Well, I'll tell you, you can keep it or not, but the reason the book I read was called Polysecure, and it's a book in polyamory, and I'm not into polyamory as a lifestyle, but the book was recommended to me, and I'm always like, I'll read a book. The book changed my life because I was able to identify in my workplace when I was feeling anxious attachment and when I was feeling avoidant attachment in my professional relationships. It was this paradigm shifting because I would feel like when I was getting anxious or when I was, and then I could understand why. And when I understood why, it was great for conflict resolution. My exec team is very good at getting into it and telling each other when we need to tell each other things. But then we were able to, I've had a very emotionally intelligent team. I was able to say, hey, I'm feeling this right now because of this. And it was because of that book. So attachment styles and the Enneagram really were transformational for me.
Well, I love that you read something, and I think so many people only read what it is they want to believe. And so you had this risk or danger of getting into an echo chamber and just reading things that reaffirm what you already believe or deepen it. And there can be good for that, right? There can be good places, but there's also like the contradictory view is so valuable. One of my favorite books is A Team of Rivals, about Lincoln's cabinet and how he assembled like people hated each other, but it was because of that he was able to triangulate better understanding of the truth and get people to give him perspective. And it's a phenomenal read. Now, I'm a nerd and I like history, but what you're telling me is reading something that you might have said, no, this isn't applicable, but actually became very, very applicable. I think that's super cool. And I think it's very self-aware. So kudos to you.
I once had someone tell me, oh, well, I didn't really like this author. And like they were trying to break down all these things. And I was like, did you get something helpful out of it? I may not agree with everything in a book. I shouldn't agree with everything. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the thing I want to take out of it is how will I apply some of it to my life or not? It's the same as therapy, right? People will, I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I've been in therapy for years and years. People are like, oh, well, therapists are also flawed. Like, why would I go to them? And I'm like, that's beside the point. It's not that they're perfect and you're going to copy them. It's how do they, and it's just, there are different types in the way that we approach the world. And that is not me. And I don't like hanging out with people like that. Like, if you're that closed-minded, I can't work with you, right? Like, there needs to be, in Spanish, the word is grieta. It's kind of like a crack in a rock, but it sounds much better in Spanish, Dusty.
It's much better.
There has to be in us the opportunity, that break to allow sunshine in, right? And Rumi has a beautiful poem, and I'm not going to be able to remember it right now, about breaks allow the light in. And it's he has a beautiful poem about it. And I think that in life, we have to be able to let ourselves be transformed by the things that happen to us. And I hope that as I continue to grow in my journey as a person and as a leader, I will always continue to allow that. I caught myself the other day, Dusty. Someone younger on my team brought an idea. And I was like, oh, well, we already tried that and it didn't work. And I was like, oh no. Because I remember 9 years ago trying to do things, and the former leaders of my organization, they were now board members or volunteers or this or that. And they were like, well, we tried that, it didn't work. And I was like, no, I never want to be that kind of person. Let's give it a try. We're at a different time, we're at a different place, we're different people. Try again, right? And so I caught myself and I was like, I don't want to be that type of leader.
Good for you for catching yourself. Yeah, I've done the same thing and realized like, uh-oh, I'm exactly what I said I didn't want to be, and you have to admit it and move on. Okay,
Yeah.
what's a leadership lesson you had to learn the hard way?
Ah, shit. I've got so many.
You don't have to tell them all.
You know, it's such a cliche. I hate to admit it. Hire slow, fire fast. That's been a hard lesson. But I'll tell you, there's a fascinating reason. And I identified this a couple of years ago. There is alcohol addiction in my family. And there's a trend with children in those situations that they have a hard time giving up on people because they believe that they're giving up on that person they love. So I found out that my difficulty letting people go, even though they had no alcohol involved in this, my difficulty letting people go was having a hard time giving up on people because I always wanted to believe in them, because in my heart of hearts, I wanted to believe in this family member I loved so much was willing to make the change.
Okay, that's rich. That
was
deep.
a very, very big, humbling, touching lesson to receive. And it didn't fix anything. I kept the person on for almost a year, but I have a more discerning perspective on why I'm doing what I'm doing when that happened.
I got a couple of thoughts running through my head. One is there's a huge difference with what you just said between someone saying, I didn't want to have failed. It wasn't about you. Is you didn't want to let go of them. You didn't want to see them fail. And it wasn't about owning the failure yourself. Like, that's a huge dichotomy. I've seen people, and I've been guilty of it like before myself, of I don't want to, if I have to let them go, I have failed them. And that's not what you're saying. And I think that's a really rich,
on them.
Yeah, that's a rich distinction. You didn't want to give up on them. Wow.
And I believe in people, and I've seen turnarounds, right? I've seen people grow. I know the trauma that people have from other jobs. PTSD from previous jobs is a real thing we do not talk about enough in the world in general. And then we all come with our own stories. Not everyone has had the privilege that I've had to do the personal work that I've done. And so that was a very, very hard lesson for me.
Yeah, it's a hard lesson that many leaders have to learn over and over again. And especially when you want people to be successful and they have to choose it. And it's so hard because I know I still wrestle with this and philosophically and talk to people when we're working together on things like this is, being able to separate their choices from yourself. Like, they've got to choose, they've got to want, they have to make the investment. We can't love them into success. We can't serve them into success. We can love them into maybe success somewhere else because they're not happy. There's all these other things, but we have to enable them to make great choices. And we can't own their outcomes or their choices. Yep. And it's so darn hard. What is your leadership superpower?
Apparently, one of my leadership superpowers is surrounding myself with excellent people that are better than me at a lot of things and not feeling threatened by it.
That is a superpower. Ooh, I love that. It's the mark of the greatest leaders. Like, if you're the smartest person in the room, if you're best at the thing, then you're in the wrong room. And that's cliche, but man, it truly becomes the sum is greater than the parts, right? When you get all of these amazing, amazing people. What's an organization beyond Centro, of course, but what's an organization that you're personally passionate about supporting? Any organization. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit, but an organization you're personally passionate about supporting. And we're going to put, of course, Centro's links in our show notes, but beyond Centro.
It's an interesting question. Like, it's a existential question in the way that I'm like, I've been so tunnel visioned in the work that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of organizations I like what they do in the areas that I do, but I'm currently in this place, Dusty, where I'm thinking about like, wait a minute, what other passions do I have? I care a lot about the environment. I care a lot about, I don't know, having a world to live in and trees and things like that. But organizations that allow people to do some really deep growth. There is a place called Wind Call, and it's this nonprofit that gives activists a 3-month I think it's a 3-week paid sabbatical to go to these cabins in the middle of nowhere to rest and to refresh themselves from the hard work they're doing. I didn't get in. I applied and I didn't get it, but I think that the work that they're doing is so very important, and allowing people the pause in this kind of work. There's another organization, it's called Seventh Generation Legacy, and I'm currently going through a fellowship with them, and it is asking you what you're on earth for, and like, what a beautiful mission to have, helping people figure out why we're here. I would say those two organizations are two that I have a lot of interest in. And there's a lot of other great organizations doing work. And I think that I can't name any right now, but I know a lot of doing mentorship and training and upskilling people and art. I think organizations that are doing folk art and collective art and bringing beauty and the non-sellable skills to people are really beautiful opportunities. You know, we're always trying to like make you more marketable. How can you earn more money? Let's give you a new skill, especially if we're working with low-income people. And so what does it look like to bring beauty and creativity and opportunity and dreams, right? Like, it's not all about the capitalist system. There's also all these other things. And so organizations that do that kind of work, I'm also very passionate about. I don't always love how they lead because there's a lot of hippiness in it. I'm like, let's get some structure so we can get you some money. But then that's a whole different can of worms.
Oh, okay. I love that. All right. Next question. If you were to take one of your tools off of your leadership tool belt, your bat belt or whatever, you know, your Wonder Woman belt, what is the leadership tool in your toolbox or on your belt that you would want to enable others to put on their tool belt?
I really believe in building relationships, and it's not networking, it's building relationships. I have hundreds of people in my life that hardly know me that I could call up and say, hey, I'm having a question. But it wasn't because it wasn't a transaction. I didn't throw a business card at them. I cared about who they were and I wanted to hear their story. And I think that we talk a lot about relationship building, but we don't lean on those relationships truly. And then we don't show ourselves as who we fully are. And I think another one of my leadership superpowers, and this was also a compliment I got years ago, someone came from the professional world and became a personal friend. I thought the persona I saw was your outward person, but I didn't expect that to be the person you were inside your home and inside your inner circles. It's not because I bring the work person into my home, it's because the person I am in my intimacy is the person I am in the world. I would hope that people could do those things. Find a way to be their most true, comfortable selves, and to lean on the world and on the trust that we are all connected and that we all are giving and receiving and being comfortable receiving.
Oh, I love that. There's so much there. The power of authenticity, the relationships, like getting past transactions. Transactions are, I do this, I get X. It's really about X, X and Y, exchange of value. Relationship is, it's not about the exchange of value. It's about the creation of value. And I love that.
So often, Dusty, I'll meet with someone and I'm like, I don't have an agenda. And they're so thrown off, they don't understand what I mean. And I'm like, let me tell you about me. I'm reading this book and I'm on this dating app and these are the questions in my soul right now. What about you? And it's just like, that's not on the agenda. And I'm like, there is no agenda, right? And then being able, this is something I tell young people all the time, Dusty. And I tell people in general, but young people all the time, build the relationship before you need it. The world is about partnerships. And I don't want to have to come to Dusty when I'm in an emergency and be like, holy shit, I need this. No, build the relationship so that when something happens, those partnerships, those friendships, those relationships are happy to be there for you.
All right, that's brilliant. And that's probably the soundbite for the entire episode here. How can our audience learn more about you and about the mission of Centro? How can they get involved if they're called to do that?
our website, centrohispanotn.org, social media as well, centrohispanotn.org. I'm on LinkedIn. I always have existential crises. And if someone just wants to chat because they listen to this podcast and they have more questions or they want to, I love meeting people. And this is also something that's super interesting, Dusty. Over the 9 years I've been in my work, I have reached out to the most random people. I saw them speak. It doesn't matter. And no one has ever said no. And I tell people this all the time. I tell young people, I'm like, give it a shot, right? And so I'm always welcome. I'm always welcoming random connections for no reason. I always make time for them. And so I think that that's the biggest call is like, tell me what you're thinking about.
I love it. Well, Claudia, I could talk to you for another hour, and I will talk to you for many, many hours, but this has been absolutely brilliant. It really is I would decode this as a masterclass in the power of authenticity, of building relationships, of self-leadership, of learning, of growth, of exploration, entrepreneurship. Like there's so many adjectives I could use to describe this conversation. And our audience is going to find lots of nuggets and richness here. Folks, if today's story challenged or inspired you, be sure to subscribe to Leadership Unlocked on your favorite platform. If you found value in this episode, just share it with someone who's walking in their path and needs to hear these words, needs to hear this wisdom. And until next time, keep unlocking what's next in your leadership. If today's episode gave you something to think about, something to apply, then there's more where that came from. Head over to arcusgroup.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's where we share tools, insights, and our leadership frameworks to help you lead with more clarity, more alignment, and more impact. No fluff, just what helps you lead better. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time on Leadership Unlocked.